Hey folks, this is Rodin from the neocom.com. I'm here to give you a guide on the Navy EWAR frigates that were released in December. My first impressions on them, as far as what I've used and seen so far, they're pretty fleet-centric ships. They can be used for solo. I have used them solo. They're pretty awkward to use in that manner though, especially for some of these ships. It's mostly because of the way the bonuses are set. For really good solo work, sometimes you kind of have to disregard the bonuses altogether and sometimes even just outright ignore them. Okay, it's just the way they're made. In a way that makes them pretty balanced, I think. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the first ship we're going to look at here. We got the Mollusk Navy issue. Real quick history on this fit. It was actually gifted to me by the very first person that killed me in a Mollusk Navy issue. He was part of a fleet, and he was first contact on me in a Plex in faction warfare space. I was also in a Mollusk Navy issue, however I was DPS fit, drone DPS fit. I couldn't really break him when we made first contact. He had plenty of time to call in his friends, and they dispatched me pretty quickly. Alright, so let's go over this ship. Let's first start with the bonuses. So being a Navy faction frigate, a lot of the bonuses are going to be bound to the actual racial frigate skill. So you got Galente frigate bonuses, 10% bonus to drone hit points and tracking speed, 10% bonus to warp scrambler optimal range, and it's got the really unique miscellaneous bonus of +2 to scramble strength to all warp scramblers. And these bonuses are not applicable for warp disruptors. So that's very unique in that, especially in faction warfare space where you see a fair number of warp core stabilizer users, this ship basically negates all of that, potentially. Depending on the ship that's being used with the warp core stabilizers, they can always put more in there to still be able to warp away, but you got a good chance at least. On 1 second they'll fit just one. Alright, let's go over the fit real quick. So as you can see, there aren't any high slot weapon bonuses in there, so you can put any weapon in this ship potentially, or none at all. For this particular fit, we're going to be using 200mm autocannons. This synergizes very well with the rest of the fit in that this fit is very heavy on tank, but also on the need for capacitor. So autocannons don't use any capacitor, so it's a good choice for this one. Also, it's going to synchronize well with our extended warp scrambler range. As you can see, with barrage ammo, we got a fall off of 10 kilometers, an optimal range of 1500 meters. So it's pretty close to where we're going to be at as far as the warp scrambler range. Being a fleet ship, we're going to have micro warp drives as opposed to afterburners, just to get in close, get to the range we need to be to apply the rest of our modules. We have Warp Scrambler 2s fitted here, and even with the Tech 2s, even with Galente Frigate 5, we're sitting at a range of 13 kilometers for Warp Scramblers, and a Warp Scrambler strength of 4. That's pretty good. Alright, you should be able to stop a lot of the Warp Core Stabilizer fit ships that you normally would see in faction warfare space. And we have a small cap booster loaded with Navy cap boosters 400s. This is going to be necessary to feed our tank. Okay, our tank is active. Of course, we'll have our damage controls. They've recently been turned into passive modules, That makes it really nice actually for when you're looking at these fits. You can see right away how they're going to affect your tank without having to go into space and turn them on and then looking at your fitting window again. Energized adaptive nanomembranes for added resists. Now you'll notice here we have two types of armor repairers. We have ancillary armor repairers loaded with nanites, of course, nice and ready, and Tech 2 small armor repairers. So these are going to be very cap heavy modules, and that's where the small capacitor booster is going to come in to feed us more cap when we need it in order to sustain our tank. And we have our rigs here. These are all tank rigs: anti-thermal, anti-thermal, anti-explosive. And just looking at our resist profile here for armor, it's pretty beefy. Alright, we got an HP of 3,844 before the two reppers kick in, so this is a pretty monster tank given its hull size. Okay, DPS, even without any damage modules, we're pushing out 141 DPS, the majority of that coming from drones. As you can see from the fit right here, we're loaded with hobgoblins. And as far as the whole fit, this is a really good setup for fleet work. I don't really see this ship being a bad choice for any kind of fleet setup, unless you're looking for something that's got legitimately more speed. This ship is rather slow compared to, say, a Tech 1 Molus or even a Tristan. Right? So, and with all the armor rigs that you've put on here, it's even going to be slower than shield variants of those ships mentioned. Alright, we're going to move on to our next ship, which is going to be the Vigil Fleet issue. Alright, another fleet-centric ship here. We have the bonuses of 5% bonus to rocket explosion velocity, 25% bonus to explosive rocket damage, 20% bonus to EM kinetic thermal rocket damage, and miscellaneous bonus of 50% bonus to stasis web of fire optimal range. Alright, so right from the get-go, you can tell that it's gonna be a pretty good choice for any kind of fleet setup that intends to either catch fast-moving kitey ships or intend to be a partner for something that has a warp disruptor or even a Navy Molus because of the extended warp scrambler range. Now, looking at my fit here, you can tell that there are there's no points or tackles, it's all webs. All right, so very similar to how I would fit a Hyena, which is a Tech 2 electronic attack frigate. So in order to catch up and apply the webs in quick fashion, you have a micro warp drive here. We're only using meta micro warp drives here. Minmatar ships, being as they are, often they are lacking in resources as far as fittings, so you'll see a lot of meta fits as opposed to Tech 2 fits when you compare them to other faction variants. Along with continuing with that meta theme, we got a meta medium shield extender to accommodate the lacking resources, and then we have our two meta stasis webifiers. These are the metaphors, and they each have a range of 15 kilometers. Now this is where it kind of gets a little awkward when you try to use this solo, because looking back in the forum posts, if I'm not mistaken, they were initially presented as having a light missile launcher damage bonus that was been removed and now replaced with rockets, and that was a pretty balanced choice. I'm glad they did that. Otherwise, this ship would probably feel pretty broken. So with the Tech 2 rocket launchers, in order to synchronize well with the range of the Stasis Web of Fires, we loaded these with Javelin rockets. Okay, Javelin Nova rockets. So we're getting the bonus from the explosive damage rocket ammo, and because of now looking at the range here too, we got a max flight range of 15 kilometers, so it's, you know, it works well for the web bonuses. Of course, we got damage control again, 2 ballistic control systems, and to kind of display the lack of fitting resources, we got here an ancillary current router, which we sorely needed. We were short about 4 to 6 power grid units on initial fit, so we really do need that to make this whole thing work, even with most of these items being meta. I have not tried using meta rocket launchers, so that might be something I'll mess around with in the future, but for this demonstration we got Tech 2s. Then got shield rigs, field extender, and EM screen enforcer. Now this is a this is a buffer tank, alright? It's not active like the Navy Mollusk that we just showed you. It also does not have as robust as resist profile as the Navy Mollusk. So we got our shield right here. However, with an EHP of 5,105, it's gonna last a good while, you know, assuming you're actually in a fleet that can move well, and maybe even with some large support you can last long enough to catch reps. However, definitely the thing that's lacking here is only 94.2 DPS from the rockets. You can change this to the high damage variant rocket ammo. However, you're not even cracking 10 kilometers with those. So in order to be in line with the rest of the fit, I went for the range variant. So this ship has a lot of mobility and really good for range dictation, and it should pair up pretty well with the Navy Mollusk, same way you would see Carries or Hyena being duos, as far as, you know, basically like a two-person tackle wing essentially. Now when we compare these to the electronic attack frigates, the Hyena, the Carries, you know, how well do they fare against that, considering the SP needed to fly each type of ship? I think they're pretty balanced. I think it's considering the SP needed to fly each ship, I think it's in a pretty good spot. I don't think these are going to eclipse the electronic attack frigates that are already available, simply because they do not have the same range that those ships have. Also, from a faction warfare plexing perspective, electronic attack frigates, being Tech 2 frigates, they cannot enter novice plexus, but these ships can. So that's definitely a pretty big deal, especially when you find yourself in a plexing grind for your respective faction. Now, you guys are probably noticing I have a lot of leaning on the faction warfare scene, mostly because that's from my own personal experience. And if you're gonna see any kind of new frigates that are being put out in the market, seeing their use in faction warfare space actually is I think it's a really good metric as far as the demand and how players feel about that new ship. Alright, so now let's move on to something a little different. The Crucified Navy issue. Now, unlike the two ships that we've shown you so far, these, I believe, has probably the best solo potential out of the bunch. And it's all about the way the fit really comes together. It feels very, very natural. Alright, so let's go over the bonuses real quick. Right, 7.5% bonus to weapon disruptor effectiveness. So note that weapon disruptor, not tracking disruptor. Alright, so this bonus will work for the tracking disruptor, which is the variant used for turret-based weapons, and also the one module used for missiles. Let's find that name real quick. Right, so that'll be the guidance disruptors. So if you're not familiar with this module, it's basically a tracking disruptor for missiles. Alright, disrupts the effective range and precision of missiles fired by the target ship. Alright, I haven't used this too much. We just simply don't, I at least, simply don't see too many missile boats to fight in low sec, so I haven't tried. I've used them, but I've not actually actively applied them to a target. Alright. Alright, so let's see how this fit comes together. So, if you have flown an Executioner before, used it as a scram kiter, this fit looks pretty familiar to you. Okay. So right now we have small focused pulse lasers, right, loaded with Scorch. Optimal range of 11 kilometers. That's pretty insane. And fall off of 14. So, very kitey weapon, alright? But for the purpose of this, we're going to keep it as a scram kiter, just so that it'll allow us to apply all the modules at roughly the same range. Okay, got our afterburner here. Warp Scrambler, our Meta Web, and our Metaphor Tracking Disruptor. Alright, so if you notice here in the Tracking Disruptor and on that show info window as well, so it's got an optimal range of 8,400 meters. Now, you might say that's awfully short, and that's because of the roll bonus. It has an 85% penalty to weapon disruptor optimal range and fall off. Alright, so at base values, weapon disruptors actually work from pretty far distance, alright? But for this ship, and you know, kind of the way CCP had designed them, they opted to keep it short, alright? Otherwise, it would just feel too broken, to be honest. So I'm kind of glad they did that. Alright, so with that setup so far, we can effectively apply all our modules at the edge of the optimal range of the tracking disruptor. And of course, we got damage control, heatsink, small ancillary armor wrapper. You might notice here, especially when I fit my scram kiters, they're pretty aggressive. Mostly because I'm in the mindset of either I'm gonna die really fast or you're gonna die really fast. So I opt to put out more damage. Alright, so we got the energy burst aerators and energy collision accelerators, which gives us added rate of fire and added damage output. Now, if for some reason we just simply can't pull off our scram kite concept and we get just outright kited, I have ECM drones in here. I have ECM drones loaded in all these fits, so unless they're actually bonus to it, can count how many times I've been saved by these little guys. Alright, definitely the most solo capable, at least for me, for my PvP flavor, out of the bunch. Alright, now we're gonna go over probably the most unique out of the new ships that we received as the Navy Griffin. Alright, we're gonna first start off with, there's two variants that I've been working on for these guys. We got the standard ECM variant, which we'll show right now. Now, this is a little different compared to how you would fit Tech 1 Griffin. Alright, Tech 1 Griffins, they have the ECM bonus and they can really push it out from long range. However, much like the reduction in effective range on the Crucifier Navy issue, the same thing happens for the Griffin Navy issue. Alright, so let's go over the bonuses real quick. We got 20% bonus to small hybrid turret damage, 20% bonus to ECM target jammer strength, a negative 85% penalty to ECM target jammer optimal range and fall off. That's kind of a big deal. So that really breaks away from the idea of very fast moving, operating from long range, paper thin, annoying EWAR wings. Alright, so we're gonna have to kind of change the way we think about these ships. So for this fit, I have light neutron blasters, fall off of 4,250 meters, optimal of 1,125. So kind of, definitely well, you know, you're gonna have to be within warp scrambler range for this to be effective. You're gonna have to commit. So as an EWAR ship, to have to commit, that's very strange. And it seems incredibly risky. However, with these Navy variants, it's not as big of a risk, and we'll go over why. Alright, so we got our micro warp drives to catch up to our targets, warp scrambler, hold them down. We got our webs, slow them down, and we got our 2 ECM modules here. Now with the recent tier-aside that happened to the modules, the Tech 2 ECM modules are actually better now compared to the Metaphor variants. Before, the Metaphor variants were actually the better choice because of the lower threshold of SP needed to use them and cost, you know, just the outright ISK value attached to them. So you can see here we have 2 racial ECMs that we're using right now. Just for the purpose of this this demonstration, we have radar, which is used against the MAR, and we got magnetometric. Alright, so we can see here that's got a 9.5 magnetometric ECM jammer strength. Alright, so that seems like a lot. However, well, let's look at it, let's compare it, you know, let's look at the ship itself, the Navy Griffin. Show you that here right now. So 9.5 jam strength, right? And these are all going to be same, 9.5 for whatever the racial one is. So the sensor strength of the Navy Griffin is 19.7. Right? So we're just under 50% potentially if we were to face another Navy Griffin and then he was fitted similarly with similar skills, he would have a less than 50% chance to actually jam us. That's kind of weak, especially since we have to be well within 10 kilometers to apply these, seeing as the range of the optimal range of this is 6,652 meters. That's a little too close. However, we got a little bit of tank on this thing. All right, so we actually are utilizing our weapon slot. We got our blasters. However, we're not really gonna enhance that by using damage mods for our weapon. We're actually going to use a signal distortion amplifier, which actually adds ECM strength. So without it, I think, if I remember correctly, we would sit at, I think, 7 or so jam strength. Now you might start looking at this kind of weird, and why is that Kaldari ship armor tanked? And it's mostly because our mid slots are being occupied by ECM modules. We don't have any more slots to put shields on this thing. Alright, so we're gonna go for an armor tank ECM platform, which is pretty standard fare when you look at these types of ships. You know, Blackbirds typically are armor, Scorpions are typically armor, simply because of the way the slot layout works out. So here we have a 200mm steel plate, Tech 2, and our rigs are all Trimarchs. And this gives us an EHP of 3,920, which is really, really good considering how much damage we're putting out. 150 DPS. That's a lot without any damage mods. And we have ECM, so this is a pretty dangerous ship. You may say like, oh, how come? Oh, this is a pretty strong-looking ship. You know, how does this get used a lot? In my experience, no, not really. I think a lot of people generally just won't use them simply because there's been changes to how ECM works. You know, we've had this the ECM compensation skill that reduces the chances of getting jammed, so that kind of makes ECM weaker in general. And of course we got our one little lonely ECM drone. You never know when it's gonna, all it needs is one jam sometimes. All it needs is one jam just to get away from a sticky situation. Alright, and now the next one we're gonna show you is the same ship. However, it's actually full-on combat fit, ready to fight and ready to shoot at things. Alright, so let's talk about this fit real quick. So I was talking about earlier how some of these ships feel awkward because of the way the bonuses are set. So I was thinking about it, and I've seen these types of lost mails actually posted in militia chat as well, and I thought it was pretty interesting that I saw a couple that were no ECM Navy Griffin. You know, I was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. It's got bonuses to ECM. Why would you not use that? But it's all it's I've used this personally, and it's pretty strong. It's really, really strong. I like to think of it as like a super tank Merlin. That's what it kind of reminds me of. Alright, so it's got the same bonuses. Alright, make sure you can see the bonuses here. Alright, we're continuing to use our light neutron blasters. We still have the same range here. Fall off of 4,858, optimal of 1,217. This is straight up brawler fit though. Alright, we've got an afterburner, medium shield extender, warp scrambler, stasis web of fire, an invuln, magnetic field stabilizer for added damage, and this is a metaphor tracking enhancer. We have our small ancillary current router because we are very short on grid. As you can see, even with my skills, I'm nearly perfect fitting skills, and even with the small ancillary current router, we still only have 0.3 grid left to work with, so it's pretty tight. Right, and now we have our small core defense field extender just for that buffer, and the second one. Alright, so let's look at the stats right here. So we got 2,975 raw shield HP right now. Okay. In station, the invuln is turned off, so we're not really seeing the full effect of it. However, with it turned off, we already have a 4,464 EHP. That's pretty big. Alright. So you're easily going to be cracking 5,000 EHP with that invuln on. And looking at the DPS here, we have 184.3 DPS. That's pretty beefy. Considering the tank that you already have and the lockdown potential of having the scram and the web, not having to sacrifice one of those slots for another shield tank, that's a pretty big deal. All right, and yeah, I mean it's very strange. You know, it's you're basically throwing away all those bonuses that's been gifted to the Navy Griffin and saying, you know what, I think I'll just take the mod slot layout here as my main concept. I've actually used this more than the ECM variant, and it feels more comfortable to use. Mostly because even with the ECM, you know, if you're not using racials and you're using just a multi-spectrum ECMs, your chance of actually hitting a jam is pretty low, considering that the ECM compensation skill's been around for a good while, and it's pretty fair to assume that your opponents would have had trained that already. Alright, so that was the 4 ships that have been introduced this December, and some sample fits for you guys to look over, and you know, feel free to copy them, make them better. Contact me, let me know if what you guys think about them. But I'd like to end here with some final thoughts on the new ship lines as a whole. I'm very happy with how they've turned out. In the beginning, I wasn't really happy with them, mostly because I thought that they were weak in solo, which is mostly what I do, and they are. You know, I was basically trying to make them do something they really weren't designed to do. Although some are viable for solo work, predominantly they are better for fleet work. Not necessarily. Now, fleet can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. The way I would define them in this concept, even just as a duo, having a partner that's in a visual fleet issue with 2 webs, and you're in RD fit Firetail, that's a pretty strong combo, you know. So little concepts like that, you know, micro gang concepts like that, I think these guys would really shine. But in, you know, as far as what's actually happening in the field, there's not a lot of, these guys aren't being bought a whole lot. I personally don't use them a whole lot or see them a whole lot. You know, I have a stock of them that I use, but as players, active players that live in low sec, there's still much heavy lean on more damage oriented ships, you know, like the Navy Comet, like the Slicer, and they're just, you know, they're better at that. But I think it's gonna take some time for us to kind of get used to these new ships and the concept. But for what it's worth, I think on release they came out pretty balanced. They were not broken, like Garmer levels of broken, if anyone remembers those. Low sec was Garmers online for a few months until they eventually got fixed. So, but overall, I'm pretty happy with them. I'm glad they're in the game, and I'll be definitely out there using them and improving on these fits. Well, thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully in the future I can put out more guides like this for you guys to see and to learn from. And you know, if I can get some comments on my work as well, I'm always looking to improve my gameplay in EVE, much like everybody else. So again, thank you very much, and we'll see you out there in hopefully a Plex or 2 that I may visit you on. Alright, thanks guys.